Hello, looking here at Def Leppard album 1987, Hysteria, the last album to feature Steve Clark, the rhythm guitarist. He died in the period between this and what was it, Adrenalize, and also the first album since Rick Allen lost his arm in the vehicle accident. On, was it? It was New Year's Eve, 1984. So the album before this was it Pyromaniac? Pyromania was pretty huge and had a lot of kind of big songs that kind of broke them into the US market. But they had quite a long gap between that one and this one. It was 4 years because of kind of, I guess the whole drummer thing was an issue. But there were other kind of dramas I having with record producers. Apparently, there was a period where they were working with Jim, the guy worked with Jim Steinman, the guy, Meatloaf's partner, writing partner, and that they found that just unworkable. Like he wanted to have a more raw sound, which is almost the opposite. Obviously, if you listen to this album, it's the direct opposite. This is the most unraw sounding album you could imagine. But they ended up working with Mutt Lang, and they wanted to work with him initially, but he was kind of burnt out, and so he said he couldn't work with him, and then they kind of went about, like I said, working with Jim Steinman, and then they tried to produce themselves, and that didn't work. They also used Mutt Lang's his engineer and tried to do it with him, just him producing, and that they didn't get the results they wanted. So finally, I think after 2 years of kind of piddling around, Mutt Lang came back and he was open to working with them again. Um, it is, you know, Def Leppard are considered overall to be, I guess, a hard rock slash metal band. Metal, I think sometimes is pushing it a bit. This I would call pop metal because it has metal elements, but it has a lot of pop elements as well. Pop rock metal, maybe. Um, the thing that really kind of stands out about this album is the production. It's, some might say, overproduced and just so shiny and yeah, shiny is the way, kind of glassy, that some people don't appreciate that. But the songs, that their intention was to write an album where every song had the potential to be a single. And I think they got pretty close to it, considering 7 of these songs actually did go on to become singles, sold 20 million copies. 7 out of 12. The other 5 that weren't could have, for certainly for lesser bands, would have used them for singles. You know, they're not as though they're. I think the only one that I think rarely doesn't have single written on it is "Love and Affection." That's a bit of a yeah. I can't imagine that doing too well on the radio, just because it kind of is a bit one note the whole way through. Doesn't have the big choruses like a lot of their other songs do, and that may be one of the criticisms of this album, is that with the production and the songwriting approach they took, a lot of the songs do sound, I'm not gonna say sound alike, but maybe the feeling is very similar the whole way through, and maybe that's the goal with an album, isn't it? To have a cohesive feeling and theme throughout the whole album. Interestingly, also that Mutt Lang has a songwriting credit on almost every song, so he was not only producing them but also uh, writing the songs. Like I know, for example, "Love Bites." I'm not sure if he wrote it, but the way that I've read it a couple of times, that he brought the song to them. Whether that was from a, and there's no other one. It's all the band members and him on the songwriting credits. So it's not as though it's some other songwriter. So I don't know if it was his song, and then they kind of adjusted and changed, add things to make it a Def Leppard song. But yeah. So the songs, yeah, we got "Woman," which was, I think, Animal was the first single, then Woman. Woman, Rocket, Animal, Love Bites, Pour Some Sugar on Me, which is probably the biggest single from this album. Armageddon It, also a single. So is every single one of those? One, two, three, four, five. The first 6 songs are all singles. That's pretty crazy. Then we got God of War. God of War could have been a single. Don't Shoot Shotgun. That could have. That Don't Shoot Shotgun and Run Riot. I always feel like I kind of want those songs to finish quickly because I want to get to Hysteria. Hysteria is probably one of my favorite Def Leppard songs ever. Excitable. Love and Affection, like I said, Love and Affection may be the only song that maybe couldn't have been a single. But, some of the shit that people release as singles, anything can be a single. I think Mutt Lange said he wanted this to be like Thriller, as in, produced very well, but also where every song could have been a single. Apparently on Hysteria, I was reading that in the pre-chorus, the part where it's building up to the chorus, the guitar chords, he would record every note individually to make up the strummed chord sound. When you play it like a whatever an A chord on the guitar, a very simple chord. You can just do it with one finger, and it's made up. You're holding down two. There's 4 open strings and 2 strings that you're pushing down onto the second fret, right? So there's 6 independent notes there. Well, when you strum a chord, you strum it all together. Ring, that's what makes the chord sound. Well, he would record each of those individual notes individually. So the first string, ding, the second one, ding, 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 and then overlay them to produce that sound, that chord sound. Don't know why. God knows why. Because maybe it had I can't imagine that would have had maybe a fuller sound, because you're kind of getting a when you're recording it independently, you're getting a uniform strum on the individual or pick of the individual note. Whereas if you're strumming the whole thing, there's always going to be a bit of kind of change of equilibrium between the pressure put upon each string or each note. But that just seems overkill in the extreme. And actually, I was reading Malcolm Young's biography recently, done by, I think, who wrote it? Is it Jeff Apter? Anyway, it's not bad. It's a little bit light, but there's some good insight into certain things. But he was talking, obviously AC/DC worked with Mutt Lange for Back in Black, and they were so single-minded in that album that they kind of were willing to push themselves and go through a quite difficult process with him in the studio, because they wanted that result, of Back in Black, and they got the result of being one of the biggest albums of all time. They worked with him again on the next album, which is For Those About to Rock, I believe, and he was in the studio. It was such a arduous, AC/DC especially, like Def Leppard, you could kind of understand, because especially if you listen to this album, the sound, you can really hear the production in the sound. But AC/DC are a lot more, underproduced usually, aren't they? They're a pretty straightforward band. I was saying before about that term raw. Well, AC/DC is a band that raw production would work well with. So they worked with him on that second album, and it was such like an awful experience that they vowed never to work with him again. I don't know did they work with him again? Did they work with him on Thunderstruck? I can't remember. But anyway, Malcolm Young didn't have a lot of good things to say about that process of making I don't think he disliked him as a person, Mutt Lange, but he just didn't like the fanning about in the studio. Like, spending 2 weeks on drum sounds, on one snare sound or something like that. So yeah, it is just a classic album. there's not really much else to say about it, really. You put it on and you listen to it, and it's like almost like a greatest hits collection, because it's just like I said, those first 6 songs are songs that you hear every day on the radio if you listen to classic rock stations, and it's just amazing that they put all those songs together. Like I said, some people don't appreciate the overproduced nature of it. But, then again, it's not as though in that same time there weren't bands just doing straight ahead kind of glam rock, hair metal, hard rock stuff without the production. So, some 80s stuff was overproduced. That first song you listen to on this album was Woman, and the snare sound, the drums is just so much reverb and echo on the drum sound. It takes a little bit of getting used to. But yeah, what I'm saying is that if you want the unpolished, you know, straight ahead stuff, there's plenty of that out there. And I guess Def Leppard want to try and make a sound of their own. And I think they do. This period of Def Leppard, certainly they have their own sound that is just instantly recognizable as Def Leppard. They're still going, aren't they? Def Leppard. They're touring. They were doing a stadium tour with Motley Crue last year. I think they're carrying on this year. Which, incidentally, if maybe you've heard the news that Mick Mars is suing Motley Crue because he left the band. He left the touring portion. Like he's old now. He's in his 70s, I think, and he also has that condition where his bones fuse together, and so he didn't feel he could tour anymore. But he wanted to remain as part of Motley Crue Inc. The corporation. I don't exactly know how all that works, like your position in the band as a company, and when you leave. And anyway, he feels he was undermined and gaslit throughout since the 80s. And if you read The Dirt, Mick Mars's part, he kind of was treated a bit like shit by the band. There was a period there that he was kind of like, he didn't know whether he was coming or going, just with the mixed messages he was getting when they were recording some of their albums. Anyway, off topic. So obviously, like I said, after this album, Steve Clark passed away, which was it alcoholism? I think. Finally, what did him in? I'm not 100% sure. I'm not really. I don't really know. I've never read any kind of biographies of any of the guys of Def Leppard or anything. Most bands that I like, even some that I don't like, I've usually read books and things about them. But Def Leppard's actually a band I don't know a huge amount of. I was listening to a podcast. Mick Wall. Is it Mick Wall? Yes. Is it? I'm now. Those rock writers. I get mixed up. I think it's Mick Wall. And he did one. He actually did 2 separate podcasts. And he did the most recent one. He went over rock stars who had died. And I think I remember him doing one on Steve Clark, and it was alcohol from what I remember. And then who replaced him? I think it was it Phil? What's his name? Phil Collins was already in the band. So yeah, like I said, I don't know that much about. Oh, was it Viv? Viv Campbell? Was it? I'm pretty sure. Just trying to check here. Incidentally, while I look at this, apparently the guy from Spandau Ballet was the Kemp brothers. One of the Kemp brothers did backing vocals on Animal, which don't know if you can hear that. There's so much backing vocals on all these songs. They didn't replace him. Okay, so for Adrenalize, they didn't replace Steve Clark. So then when did the next... oh God, I can't bother. Okay. Oh, something else I was going to say about this as well. Oh, that's right. I was going to say Rocket. So Rocket is a single that actually I remember. As I was looking at this album, I was thinking because there's a particular I had an event in my life in 1989 when I was a kid that I kind of remember a lot of things around the year in 1989. Um, and so I specifically remember watching the video for Rocket in 1989 as kind of a new release video when I was a little kid. And then I was thinking, well, this is a 1987 album. How was it that Rocket was being a new release video single in 1989? And then in doing a little bit of research, or just a bit of reading, I realized that actually, yes, Rocket was released almost 2 years after the first single, after Animal was released. It was such a huge album, is continuously selling, that they just pushed out single after single through 87, 88, and even into 89. And apparently by the end of it, like if you read the reviews, it gets quite good reviews, Hysteria. But by the time Rocket comes out, I think people are sick of it a little bit of the album and the band, because the reviews kind of are quite nasty for that one. Um, so yeah, it's kind of funny to see that. All right, I'll leave it there. Def Leppard, Hysteria, great album, classic album. Thank you for watching.